Hey, everybody. Wherever you're tuning in from, thank you for being here with us today. This is the True Freedom Project. And around here, we believe something real. True freedom is something that you build. It doesn't happen overnight, it doesn't happen by accident. It happens through practice, through structure, and through community. And most importantly, showing up when it's really, really hard. And before we get into anything heavy, I just want to start off with some food for thought questions. Have you ever lived a life that looked fine from the outside, but inside you were barely holding it together? When the world thinks you're strong, but inside you're falling apart. What happens when survival mode and institutionalization becomes the only way you know how to live? How many times do you try to change your life only to end up right back where you started? How many times have you walked out of jail or prison with the same untraded military grade PTSD and addiction to the same tyrannical PO and a wife that's still in active addiction with your kids in foster care or worse? No support system to help you focus on what you should and can change and what you can't. And what do you do when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, trying to rebuild a life you never learned how to live in the first place? This is the True Freedom Project. It's a space for people and by people who have lived through it, survived it, and are learning to thrive on the other side of it. Veterans, street veterans, people just released after years of incarceration, people rebuilding after addiction and alcoholism, mental illness, and behavioral issues, survivors of the sex trade or sexual violence, people who have been homeless, people who are divorced, lost everything, and can't legally see their kids, or like many of us here, carrying a combination of most, if not all, of the above. So if you're here, you're probably not looking for inspiration. You're looking for something real, something grounded, and something that actually helps. So if you're trying to change your life, if you're trying to stop repeating the same patterns, if you're trying to build something solid and something you can stand in, you're in the right place. Because true freedom comes from practice. Welcome to the True Freedom Project. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the True Freedom Project. My name is Omar Kabir. I'm the CEO of Whole Health Veteran Services out here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And before we begin today's podcast, I want to make something kind of clear in this episode. I'll be talking about the 12 steps of recovery and sharing my own parts and experiences with it. And I'm not speaking on behalf of any 12 step fellowship, and I don't represent them in any way, shape, or form. Everything I share here is my own personal journey, my reflections, and my understanding. And I say that up front because, Tradition 6 reminds us that 12 step fellowships don't endorse or align themselves with any outside enterprises. And just by me saying that, basically this podcast is completely independent. I'm honoring that boundary. Tradition 11 also matters here. It asks us to maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, films, and public media. So by speaking only for myself and not for any other group, I'm respecting that tradition and protecting the anonymity and the integrity of the fellowship. So, and then finally, tradition 12 too, it tells us to place principles before personalities. So what I share here isn't about authority or representation. It's about humility, honesty, and the spiritual principles that guide recovery. So my intention is just simply to offer my experience and not to speak for any organization or fellowship whatsoever. So, and to start, early recovery is, it's often described in very spiritual language, and like the truth of it is like it's far more human. The first three steps of any 12-step program, honesty, hope, and faith, are the spiritual principles behind steps 1, 2, and 3. For example, they're impossible to practice when someone is still fighting for basic survival and early recovery. This episode will explore step 1, and then we'll lead into the rest of the steps in other podcasts. But and we're gonna lean into the steps not as just abstract principles, but as lived experiences shaped by safety, stability, and community. So, step 1 asks people to be honest about the reality of their lives, and but yet honesty requires a level of safety many individuals simply don't have when they enter into recovery. Bridge housing creates this foundation where truth becomes possible, offering stability dignity, a place where someone can finally stop running, right? And which kind of leads into step two of hope. Hope, it, it doesn't really appear on its own. It kind of grows out of relationships that you form in like 12-step rooms or with peer support specialists. And you're kind of borrowing that hope from people that have walked that path and, came out the other end, shining brighter than they've ever shined in their entire lives. And whole health reinforces it. It helps individuals, with small experiences, right? Those small wins, those meaningful wins across every dimension of your well-being. And step three calls for faith. And so many people struggle with this step, when they come in. It's the God step, and it's where a lot of people get stuck. Mainly steps 3, 4, and 5. And but I really want to stress that it doesn't have to be a religious step at all. You don't have to understand God when you come into this program. You just got to have this willingness to trust in a new process, right? A new process after years of relying on survival strategies that just don't serve you anymore. Just be willing to try something different. And our center, that trust is supported by structure. It's supported by community, by whole health, case management, and it makes that surrender feel safe rather than risky. So together, these steps mirror the phases of reintegration that we guide people through, stabilization, assessment, and engagement. And so this episode is basically about how 12 steps and our organization work hand in hand. So how bridge housing, whole health, case management, peer support, 12 steps create conditions where early recovery can seriously start to take root. And I'll share a lot of my experience and how this worked for me. Neil had sent me an episode, or he's in the middle of moving at the moment, so I'm doing this on my own, but this is what he had to say. He says, addiction is rarely the root problem. It is the attempt to solve emotional stuckness. The tragedy is that the solution becomes the problem and makes the original pain worse. And this creates a double bind. Most people think step one is only about substances, the classic definition of addiction. It isn't. We are all addicted to our problems, and mostly our problems are about being unable to process the emotions and meaning we have with things. So step one is about being stuck in ourselves. Addiction is the solution we found for emotional pain we didn't know how to process. And then he asked me a couple of questions, or at least some questions he wants to address in this podcast. What did addiction solve for you emotionally? When did you realize abstinence wasn't enough? What are the signs you're still spiritually and emotionally stuck? And how did honesty about the real problem change your recovery? So let's hit him. Let's hit him one at a time. So what it solved for me emotionally, it's gonna really depend on which epic of my life I was going through at the time. But originally, right, like in the beginning, it didn't just like numb the pain, right? It gave me this whole new identity. It gave me buddies that carried guns. We all grew up on Goodfellas and casinos and Boys in the Hood and just thought that was the shit, right? It gave me access to people with money, and they gave me money for selling, for transporting, for moving weight, or whatever the hell, right? I don't know if I remember like the first 20 or $100 that I made, but yeah, as being like this homeless 16-year-old kid, and it was incredible, right? It gave me this attractive, it just made me feel like I was awesome. It gave me attractive and willing women, right? Going to day-long shows in the woods or in the desert in Northern California or whatever the hell. Everybody's tweaking and peaking, and all the girls were putting out. And I'm sorry for being vulgar, but I'm just being honest. It gave me a sense of power, belonging, being somebody, right? So, it gave me the ability to do whatever I wanted. Just like this feeling of invincibility, right? It cured me of everything it gave me everything that I think I ever dreamt about or fantasized about there for a little bit. And I think a lot of people can understand and relate to that. My addiction didn't start with like misery whatsoever, right? It started with like relief and reward. Yeah. It's like I finally found that missing piece, that thing that just made everything better. It shut off my depression. It made sex feel better. It gave me that effort switch. Yeah, when life started to feel too heavy, just get the bucket, right? They amplified my ability to point fingers, to catastrophize, minimize, excuse like the most outrageous behavior, and just tolerate uh, chaos and crap that I had no business tolerating. And I mean, after years of sitting through all that insanity and stuff, you start to see through that veil, dude. There's like adults sleeping, taking advantage of minors, the exploitation, dude. It's so sad, dude. What ended up happening to so many kids, just kids. Yeah, we're all just kids at one point. It's insane. So, in the short term, it made me feel like I could handle life. In the long term, it totally destroyed every single part of it. And you know what? The rest of the questions will come up with what I. So when we're talking about walking in a 12-step program for the first time, right? Especially if you have like a co-occurring PTSD diagnosis or anxiety or mania, depression. It really is so important to just keep it simple, and not because you're incapable or any of that stuff, but because your nervous system is just in a state where simplicity is like the only thing that's going to work. And I'll explain why here. For me, uh, that party that I mentioned earlier stopped decades ago. I had absolutely no control over the substances that I was using. So this last relapse and whatever, at this last time that I went out there, all of the cocaine in the city, everything in the city was laced with fentanyl. And I think the only reason I'm still alive today is because I was on the Sublocade injection and it was still in my system. So I've come to believe that shot saved my life. Um, yeah, it's just a theory, but it's one that I hold on to. Um, I'm one of those people. I had an abnormal, super high tolerance for opioids and cocaine. I don't know why. No matter how much I used, I just didn't die. I'm one of those guys. And that combination completely fried my brain. Yeah, there was like no dopamine left. I couldn't function in any normal capacity. Stay awake for days, sometimes like a week straight, and it would push me into full blown psychotic breaks. I'm chasing stimulants with alcohol and opiates, to try to pump the brakes and trying to control the ups and downs, whatever you want to call it, and drink until I passed out. At the same time, I'm not eating. I had to wake up and chug 6, 7, 8 glasses of water, force myself to hydrate. My brain was fried. Doesn't even begin to describe it. There is no managing your life in that condition. None. It was just completely, totally, and utterly powerless. And that's the state of mind that I entered detox with. And it took a month just to get in it. And in that place, there's no hope. There's no strength. There's no resilience. There's just this complete abandonment of being human being, dude. There's nothing there. You become, oh man, utterly dependent on the substance. I wanted to stop, but I just couldn't outrun what the hell was happening. I knew exactly what was going on. I knew I might die. I knew people around me were dying. People all over the city were dropping dead from this fentanyl stuff. And the substances still had way more power over me than I had over them. And so in short, it's like being haunted. I'm haunted by PTSD, depression, reality, danger, uh, totally dependent on the substances, and shame, just all at once. My body was at its weakest. My mind's collapsing. And yeah, the shame is so heavy. You just don't believe in yourself or anything good, really, whatsoever. And yeah, I think that answers the question of that's when I truly realized just how deeply emotionally, spiritually, and physically stuck I was for the first time, like in every area of my life. And so how did honesty for the first time about this problem change my recovery? I think was a question. So because I'd been in treatment so many times before, I made a very different decision this time around. I stayed in a lockdown detox unit, and I went completely crazy there for a little while. But no, before I even went into rehab, And I got to find that doctor who said I could technically discharge, but she's like, I want you to stay until this bed at the Dewey Center opens up. She saved my life. And it sucks. My brain was so fried, I can't remember her name, but I'll never forget her face. But yeah, when I finally got to rehab, I didn't buy a phone. I didn't reach out to people and say, hey, I'm in detox, or I'm in rehab, or hey, I'm sorry for what I did, or any of that stuff. I did pay back people that I owed money to. But I exercised, I slept, I ate, I kept my room clean. I went to my appointments and I went to meetings. I just kept it so simple. And that was it. Um, and at the time, my ex-wife had just got a DWI with our son in the backseat of the car. Um, my other baby mama passed away from an overdose, and both the kids are in foster care. I completely walked away from my possessions. Right, I literally just I told my landlord I'll pay whatever for her having to throw everything out of my apartment, and just how sick I am, and just how I just couldn't be there anymore. And I just was basically voluntarily homeless and looking for sober living. It's I understood one day at a time in a completely different way. I didn't want sobriety at that point anymore, right? Because I'd done that so many times. I wanted freedom, right? Freedom from my diagnosis, freedom from my character defects, freedom from the lies and the stories I told myself for years. And even then, it was a battle to tell the truth. I would lie for no apparent reason, um, and had to catch myself and tell on myself when I did. It was just really odd to like watch your brain just do the mental gymnastics even after sobering up for a while and just being so aware of it. But anyways, my defects would still creep in. Um, but there was just this absolute certainty that I was done with that life, and I mean all of it. Um, so yeah, if you look back on it, I kept it simple. It was a survival strategy. I think early recovery with co-occurring PTSD and addiction just requires radical simplicity. Your brain is just chemically and neurologically overwhelmed, so complexity becomes impossible. Fellowships call it, restless, irritable, and discontent. I just couldn't stand how loud somebody would chew, or just the smallest little things were so irritating. And it's because my biological functions are just fried. And honestly, in that period of time, simplicity isn't a weakness at all, dude. It's the only workable path. So just please take your time. Um, yeah, at that point, the real meaning behind powerlessness for some of us, I can't speak for everybody, right? Just for me, I'll just say for me, it wasn't philosophical. It was definitely biological. Um, yeah, the substances just completely overrode my conscious mind. Yeah, I knew I was dying, but I couldn't stop. Right, so powerlessness wasn't. It was accuracy, right? And it had nothing to do with shame. It was just I live or die. So, and yeah, just thinking about it today is it's really crazy, right? I entered detox, weeks without sleep, psychotic breaks, fentanyl laced cocaine, alcohol and opiates used as like a chemical break, right? No food, forced hydration, brain with no dopamine left, no hope, no resilience. It's just collapse, man. So for me, choosing 40 days in a locked detox was a decisive act of survival. It wasn't fear. It was my first act of agency in a very long time. It was like the first real behavioral expression of step one. I am powerless over my addiction. My life is completely unmanageable. I'm powerless over alcohol. I'm powerless over cocaine and all other mind altering substances. It doesn't matter at that point. I'm, for lack of a better word, I'm fucked. Um, and yeah, radically simple in rehab, dude. No phone. Eat, sleep, exercise, go to your appointments, go to your meetings. Eat, sleep, exercise, go to your appointments, go to your meetings, clean your room, take a shower, all that stuff, right? One function at a time. And eventually, my nervous system started to stabilize again. Luckily, thank God, I didn't think I was going to be able to do that. I didn't want sobriety. I wanted freedom. Just I carried around my diagnosis like it was an identity, right? Just freedom from the lies, the old identities, freedom from the shame of self deception. Not some dude on fucking Goodfellas or Casino or whatever the hell, or whatever fantasy my addict brain would come up with. But yeah, sobriety is a condition, dude. Freedom is a transformation that I needed to undertake. So that was just, I don't think I thought that in these exact terms when I got there, but it's kind of like the essence of I'm done. I'm done with this stuff. I can't do it anymore. I don't want to. Yeah, I was just done with that life. Not dramatic, just absolute. And that collapse became the doorway. So yeah, it was step one, become real words. The step one becomes real, but not in words. But it becomes real in like surrender. You give in, you don't give up. So I've been in out of treatment more times than I can count, at least a dozen. I've had 2 years clean a couple of times, and my longest stretch was 6 years. Yeah, 6 years. And so I learned a lot of things the hard way. Like when you stop using for a while, especially after you've worked the program and then you start back up again, addiction doesn't come back the same. It mutates, it evolves, it comes back stronger, darker, and more destructive than you've ever seen before. It's not just the substances that get worse, dude. The depression gets heavier, the lies get bigger, the hopelessness digs deeper. You compromise yourself in ways you never imagined you were capable of before, and that's basically what I didn't understand back then, and kind of what I'm seeing clearly now. And so those failures and those other recoveries, they were teaching me things that I wasn't ready to hear. Right? It wasn't just the substances; there was a lot more going on. They were showing me parts of step one I didn't want to look at, and yeah, one of the biggest lessons I learned this time around is something I wish I understood years ago. Like, I should have taken my time after I got out of prison. Just because you spend 4 years in prison doesn't mean you are recovered at all. I should have went into transitional living. I should have leaned on peer support. I shouldn't have tried to reconnect with my ex-wife or old using buddies or people that were still actively using, thinking, I don't know, you can save people. It's really just so bizarre looking back on it today. But I wasn't saving anybody. I wasn't saving her. I wasn't saving myself. If I just slowed down and just built the foundation instead of like sprinting back into chaos, I'd like to think that the outcome would have been different. But I don't do that wishful thinking stuff anymore. But and not because I'm like special. It's just because I finally start to understand that second part of step one, not just powerless over the substances, but the unmanageability piece of it. I just see it in a completely different way. I was powerless over me, or the parts of myself that I didn't want to face. And like that, there were flaws in me that had nothing to do with the drugs. Codependence, this need for control, this inability to listen, this ego that confused social acceptability, like a job, a car, and an apartment, with actual maturity, right? I was totally run by fear, self-centeredness, or the big four, they call them, right? All of that times 10. My character defects, all my instincts about me as a human being were just so completely off balance and pointing in the wrong direction. And this is very common, I think, in early recovery. And again, I'm just going to speak for myself. You can convince yourself that distance from the drugs means that you're actually healthy again. And it just didn't. It just meant that I was sober. And sometimes sober people can be just as sick as people are using. So, yeah. So it created this dynamic where my actions in addiction and in sobriety just had so many real consequences on my family, my friends, and dude, most painfully on my kids. And it wasn't until years of therapy, psychology study, real work in the rooms, honest self-reflection that I finally understood how deep those patterns ran, just how much of my default mode was shaped long before I ever picked up a substance. And yeah, like I can see today how my actions shape my kids' default modes. Um, their separation anxiety, their self-esteem, their character. And even though a lot of that is so much better today and different today, there's still work to do. And more on that on another podcast. And what I needed and what I finally gave myself was a place to sit still, to unpack, to listen, to build a team of people that I could trust. Time to give and earn the credibility with my kids, and to find sovereignty over my own life. I had to grow into somebody my kids could rely on, and I mean that. I had to grow into that person. I had to give myself a time to become that person. Not somebody they fear losing all the time. And yeah, the journey continues. If there was like a sign over my head today, I'd still read "Work in Progress." And yeah, just the part that matters the most is like this awakening you find when you finally stop running and when you finally surrender is unlike anything else. I hate saying this. It sounds like I'm bragging, but I never thought I'd get an advanced degree. I never believed that I'd own my own house. My daughter's upstairs playing guitar with her friends, and my son's at a basketball game with his mom. And, got a dog, and I pay my bills on time. But it's bigger than that, man. I have trust with my kids, and my ex-wife knows she can lean on me today and talk to me about anything. I earn the respect of the people around me, and it's true, man. I never believed I'd respect myself the way that I do today, and yeah, that's that dignity, that quiet, steady dignity. It's just something that I earned one honest step at a time, and again, work in progress, dude. So to recap, what I just kind of covered, I did cover that addiction, yeah, it comes back more severe. It does. Yeah, you ask anybody with years and years in these rooms, they'll tell you that. It's pretty well documented. A relapse period, or a relapse after a period of sobriety, just at least a faster escalation, right? Deeper depression and just higher risk behaviors. And what I was describing basically matches what clinicians call kindling. Each relapse kind of intensifies the next one. When you have co-occurring PTSD, right, with your substance abuse, it just amplifies the severity of the relapses, because you have trauma dysregulation and the substance use, and it creates this like feedback loop. Same thing with like depression, anxiety. It's just feedback. It just feeds on each other, and you return to using just more dangerously, and you become more psychologically destabilized. And talked about codependence, control, and ego, which is like the most common blind spots in early recovery. I think many people make the mistake of, the external stability being internal maturity, right? Being able to name this is very powerful and very accurate. And transitional living, peer support, 12-step rooms, all of them working together significantly reduced the relapse risk. And the research consistently shows that structured environments, peer-based accountability, they just dramatically improve outcomes after incarceration or treatment. And the sad part, children absorb the emotional patterns of addiction, even when the parent is sober. So, and that reflection on my kids like aligns with what the family systems research has shown for decades. And again, we'll get into that more in other segments of this podcast. So in a nutshell, step one isn't just about the substances. It's about dismantling the old self and building a new one with intention. So, and as we wrap up step one, so we can get into step two, I just want to say this plainly. Early recovery is overwhelming. It's confusing. It's uncertain. It's just fucking hard. But that hardness, it's not it's a sign that you're doing it right, right? That hardness isn't a sign that you're doing it wrong. You're actually doing it right. That you're finally doing the things that you've been avoiding for years, and that's gonna be hard. So, in the beginning, the most important thing you can do is to keep it simple. Focus on yourself in the smallest and most basic ways. You actually have to be selfish, but in a good way, because you can't save your ass and your face at the same time. And that giant pile of problems that feels impossible, they're not going anywhere. But yeah, you got to realize that that brain that you're working with in early recovery, the one that's exhausted, chemically wrecked, traumatized, desperately trying to reboot, that brain can't be the one that solves these problems. And to be honest, that same logic applies to like people who've been incarcerated for years, for a long time too. That institutionalized brain needs time to adjust. So honesty in step one is recognizing that in this moment, I'm poisonous to myself. And if I don't slow down, if I don't give myself the grace and permission to change, I'm going to stay poisonous to the people that I love too. And for those of us, or at least for me, with co-occurring diagnosis, right? Addiction, PTSD, depression, whatever it is, the truth is simple. If I don't get a handle on my addiction, how in the hell am I ever going to learn to live with and manage my mental health? One feeds the other, one blocks the other. So one has to be addressed first. But there is hope. There's definitely hope. You don't have to manufacture it yourself. In the beginning, you borrow it. You borrow it from people who know that misery all too well and are willing to work and walk with you until you can stand on your own. So, yeah, that's step one. Step two is I just kind of mentioned that a little bit, but that's step one. That initial collapse becomes the doorway, and in the next episode, we're going to step into what comes after that collapse, which is the possibility, the shift, the spark. So, yep, which is step two. So tune in next time on the True Freedom Project. Stay safe, take care of yourself, and I'll see you guys soon.